Standing outside the courthouse, I watched my nephew Jason led away in handcuffs, his expensive suit wrinkled and his face pale with the reality of 5 years in federal prison. The reporters shout questions, but all I can think about is how he once called me expendable, while he systematically stole everything I'd built with my own hands. Now, as the judge's gavel still echoes in my mind and the $4.7 million judgment burns in his lawyer's briefcases, I finally understand what true justice feels like. Not sweet, but absolutely necessary. The fluorescent lights in the conference room cast harsh shadows across the polished mahogany table, making everything feel clinical and cold. Elliot Finch sat in his usual spot, third chair from the left, the same position he'd occupied for nearly 2 decades of family business meetings. His weathered hands rested flat against the smooth wood, fingers spread wide as if he could somehow anchor himself to this familiar space that suddenly felt foreign. Jason strode into the room with the confidence of a man who owned the world, his expensive Italian suit pristine despite the August heat. At 35, Elliot's nephew carried himself like he'd already conquered everything worth conquering. The subtle smirk playing at the corners of his mouth should have been Elliot's first warning. "Uncle Elliot, glad you could make it," Jason said, settling into the chair at the head of the table. Their father's chair, the chair that had never been Jason's to claim. "We've got some exciting news to share." Rachel Voss glided in behind him, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor with military precision. She took the seat directly across from Elliot, her cold blue eyes studying him like he was a specimen under glass. Everything about her, from her perfectly styled blonde hair to her designer blazer, screamed calculated success. "Before we begin," Jason continued, pulling out a leather portfolio, "I want to thank you for all your years of dedication to this company. Really, Uncle Elliot, your work ethic has been inspirational." The past tense hit Elliot like a physical blow. Has been, not is, not continues to be. "I'm pleased to announce that Rachel and I have secured a major external investment deal that's going to take this company to the next level." Jason's smile widened as he slid a document across the table. "The investors were impressed by our vision for modernization and growth." Elliot's eyes scanned the papers, his heart sinking with each line. Restructuring, new leadership, streamlined operations. His name appeared nowhere in the organizational charts, nowhere in the future plans. 23 years of 16-hour days, of missing family dinners and weekend getaways, of pouring his soul into every project, erased with corporate buzzwords and legal jargon. "I don't understand," Elliot said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Where do I fit in this new structure?" Rachel leaned forward, her expression a masterclass in false sympathy. "Elliot, the investors felt that bringing in fresh perspectives would be beneficial for everyone. There's a generous severance package, of course." Severance. The word tasted like ash in his mouth. Jason's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cruel beneath the polished exterior. "It's nothing personal, Uncle Elliot. It's just business, you understand." But Elliot did understand, perhaps for the first time in years. As he sat there, surrounded by the betrayal of those he'd helped raise and protect, a cold clarity began to settle over him. They thought they were dealing with the same man who had quietly absorbed every slight, every overlooked contribution, every moment of being taken for granted. They were wrong. "I see," Elliot said finally, his voice steady despite the earthquake in his chest. "I think I understand perfectly." The workshop felt different now, like returning to a childhood home after decades away. Elliot pushed open the heavy metal door, breathing in the familiar scent of sawdust and machine oil that had been his daily perfume for 23 years. The overhead lights flickered to life, illuminating rows of tools hanging in precise order on pegboard walls, each one exactly where he'd left it, exactly where it had always been. But nothing felt the same. His hands trembled as he set down his keys on the workbench, the metal clattering against the scarred wooden surface. The sound echoed in the cavernous space, bouncing off walls lined with his life's work. Custom cabinets, intricate woodwork, the prototype furniture designs that had helped build the company's reputation for craftsmanship. Streamlined operations. Jason's words replayed in his mind like a broken record. Fresh perspectives. Elliot sank onto the worn wooden stool beside his favorite workstation, the same spot where he'd eaten countless lunches alone, where he'd stayed late into the night perfecting designs while his family slept. The stool creaked under his weight, a sound as familiar as his own heartbeat. He pulled out his phone and stared at the contact list, thumb hovering over his brother's name. David had been quiet during the meeting, avoiding eye contact, fidgeting with his wedding ring. Had he known? Had they all discussed this behind closed doors while Elliot worked overtime to meet their latest deadline? The memory hit him like a physical blow. Last month's family dinner, where Jason had been unusually interested in the company's financial structure. All those casual questions about contracts, about Elliot's role in day-to-day operations, even Rachel's sudden appearances at the office, claiming to need Jason for urgent meetings that pulled him away just as important decisions were being made. How long had they been planning this? Elliot's gaze fell on a framed photograph sitting on his workbench. The three of them at the company's 10th anniversary celebration. David with his arm around Elliot's shoulders, Jason grinning between them, all of them raising glasses of champagne. To family, David had toasted that night. To loyalty. The frame was dusty. When was the last time he'd really looked at it? He stood abruptly, pacing between the workbenches that had been his kingdom. Every tool, every project, every innovation, built with his hands, his vision, his sacrifice. The investors hadn't seen any of this when they made their decision. They'd seen Jason's PowerPoint presentations and Rachel's financial projections, but they'd never witnessed the soul of the operation. The workshop's silence pressed against him, heavy with the weight of abandoned dreams. He thought of all the family gatherings he'd missed to finish urgent projects, all the vacations postponed because the business needed him. While he'd been building their empire, they'd been building his exile. But as Elliot stood among the tools and timber that had shaped his life, something shifted in his chest. The shock was crystallizing into something sharper, more focused. They thought they knew him, the quiet uncle, the reliable workhorse who would accept his fate with dignity. They had made their first mistake. He pulled out his phone again, this time scrolling to a different contact. Fred Myers, his old friend who'd warned him years ago about the dangers of blind loyalty. It was time to make a call. Fred Myers hadn't changed much in the 5 years since his retirement. Still the same sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, still cutting straight to the heart of problems. He set down his coffee cup and studied the documents Elliot had spread across his desk. Jesus, Elliot. How long since you've actually looked at the company's books? I trusted them. The words felt hollow. Jason said he'd handle the business side. Sophia Green arrived within the hour, briefcase clicking open with military efficiency. At 42, she had the reputation of a lawyer who didn't lose. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, her gray suit all business. Let's see what we're dealing with, she said, spreading financial documents across Fred's dining table like crime scene photos. The first red flag appeared within minutes. Sophia's finger traced a line item from 18 months ago. A consulting fee paid to Voss Strategic Solutions. Rachel's company, Elliot said. But she wasn't working with us then. According to this, she was. $50,000 for market analysis. Did you authorize this? Elliot's stomach dropped. I never saw this invoice. All consulting contracts were supposed to go through me. Fred leaned over Sophia's shoulder, expression darkening. Look at this pattern. Every 3 months, like clockwork, always just under the threshold requiring board approval. The documents painted a devastating picture. Consulting fees that predated any official relationship. Expense reports for restaurants Elliot had never heard of. Equipment purchases that never appeared in workshop inventory. Here's the smoking gun, Sophia said, sliding a contract amendment across the table. Revised partnership agreement filed 6 months ago. Your signature is on it. Elliot stared at his own name scrawled at the bottom. But the terms were foreign. Clauses about performance evaluation periods that effectively gave Jason veto power over major decisions. I never signed this. The signature looks authentic, Fred observed. Because it is my signature, but not on this document. Elliot's voice grew steadier. Jason had me sign vendor contracts last fall, said it was routine paperwork. There must have been blank pages mixed in. Sophia made notes in precise handwriting. If they forged this amendment, that's fraud. But we need more evidence. Elliot stared at the scattered records, numbers telling the story of his systematic betrayal. Every late night in the workshop, every sacrificed weekend, Jason and Rachel had been building their case for his removal. How long have they been planning this? Fred and Sophia exchanged glances. Based on these documents? At least 2 years, probably longer. 2 years of smiles and family dinners. 2 years of lies. Now he knew exactly what he was fighting. The family business headquarters gleamed in the morning sunlight, its steel and glass facade reflecting Elliot's weathered pickup truck as he pulled into the visitors' parking. Visitors' parking, when he'd helped design the building's workshop wing. The symbolism wasn't lost on him. Jason's corner office occupied the building's prime real estate, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a commanding view of the city. Elliot knocked once and entered without waiting for permission. "Uncle Elliot." Jason's smile was as polished as his mahogany desk. "What brings you by?" "I thought we covered everything in yesterday's meeting." Elliot closed the door behind him and remained standing. "We need to talk about Voss Strategic Solutions." The smile flickered for just a moment. "Rachel's consulting firm? What about it?" $50,000 in payments over the past 18 months. Payments I never authorized. Elliot's voice stayed level, controlled. Payments that predate any official business relationship with our company. Jason leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled. "Uncle Elliot, you're the operations guy. You handle the workshop beautifully, but the strategic planning side has always been my domain. Rachel provided valuable market analysis that helped secure our recent investment. Market analysis that I never saw. Contracts that bypassed our standard approval process. Things move fast in today's business environment. We can't wait weeks for committee approvals on every consulting contract." Jason's tone carried a patronizing edge that made Elliot's jaw tighten. "You've been so focused on the workshop, I didn't want to burden you with the administrative details." Administrative details. Elliot repeated the words slowly. "Is that what you call altering partnership agreements without my knowledge?" This time, Jason's mask slipped entirely. His eyes hardened, and when he spoke again, the familial warmth was gone. "I don't know what you think you found, but I'd be very careful about making accusations you can't prove." "I'm not making accusations. I'm asking for explanations." Jason stood, moving to the window with his back to Elliot. "The business world has changed, Uncle Elliot. What worked 20 years ago doesn't work now. Sometimes that means making difficult decisions about who's equipped to handle modern challenges. And you decided I wasn't equipped?" "I decided the company needed fresh leadership. The investors agreed." Jason turned around, his expression cold and final. "Look, there's a generous severance package waiting for you. Take it. Enjoy your retirement. Don't complicate things unnecessarily." Elliot studied his nephew's face, the face he'd watched grow from an eager teenager into this calculating stranger. "You know what I find interesting, Jason? You keep talking about what the investors want, but you haven't once asked what I want. What you want stopped mattering the moment you became a liability to this company's future." The words hit Elliot like a physical blow, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he felt something crystallize inside him. A cold, hard certainty that replaced the last vestiges of familial loyalty. "I see," Elliot said quietly. "Thank you for clarifying where we stand." As he left Jason's office, Elliot knew there was no going back. Sophia's law office felt like a war room. Documents covered every available surface. Bank statements, contracts, email printouts, and financial records spread across her conference table in meticulous order. Elliot sat across from her, watching as she constructed what would become his legal arsenal. "We need to establish a timeline," Sophia said, marking dates on a whiteboard with surgical precision. "Show the court this wasn't opportunistic. It was calculated fraud." She held up a bank statement from 2 years ago. "First payment to Voss Strategic Solutions, March 15th. But look at this." She slid another document across the table. Rachel's LLC wasn't even registered until March 20th. They backdated the invoices. Elliot studied the paperwork, each page another nail in Jason's coffin. How is that possible? Simple. They created fake invoices after the fact, then amended the accounting records. Sloppy work, actually. They assumed no one would dig this deep. Sophia's pen clicked against her teeth as she thought. The question is, how did they access the company accounts to authorize these payments? The answer came from Tina Rodriguez, the office assistant who'd been Elliot's eyes and ears for the past decade. She sat nervously in Sophia's office, clutching a manila folder like a life preserver. "I never thought anything of it at the time," Tina said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But Jason asked me to help him with some routine paperwork about 6 months ago. Said his uncle was too busy with a big project to handle the administrative stuff." "What kind of paperwork?" Sophia asked. "Payment authorizations, maybe 15 or 20 of them. He said they were for vendor payments that had been delayed, and Mr. Elliot had already approved them verbally." Tina's hands trembled slightly. "I watched him sign them. The signature looked right to me." Elliot felt his stomach turn. "You saw him forge my signature? I thought he was helping you. He said you were stressed about the workshop deadlines and he was trying to take some of the burden off your shoulders." Sophia made notes, her expression grim. "Do you still have access to the office?" Tina nodded. "They haven't changed my passwords yet. I think they forgot about me. We need you to document everything you can access. Email records, file modifications, anything that shows unauthorized changes to company documents." Sophia leaned forward. "But you need to be careful. If they discover what you're doing—" "I understand," Tina said. "Mr. Elliot deserves better than this. He's the only one in that family who ever treated me with respect." Over the next 3 days, the evidence mounted. Hidden email threads between Jason and Rachel discussing the Elliot problem. Modified contracts with digital signatures that forensic analysis would later prove were manipulated. Bank records showing a pattern of payments that corresponded perfectly with Jason's private meetings. But the smoking gun came in an email dated 8 months ago. A message from Rachel to Jason with the subject line, "Timeline for transition." "Phase 1 complete," the email read. "Financial documentation altered per our discussion. Phase 2 begins next quarter. Suggest initiating performance review protocol. Target completion, 2nd quarter next year." Elliot stared at the screen, reading his own elimination timeline. They'd planned his removal like a corporate restructuring, complete with phases and target dates. "We have them," Sophia said quietly. "This is conspiracy to commit fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. The district attorney is going to love this case." The upscale restaurant was Rachel's choice. Neutral territory, she'd said over the phone. The kind of place where business deals were made over wine and carefully crafted conversations. Elliot arrived 10 minutes early, choosing a corner table where he could watch the entrance. Old habits from his military days, Fred would have said. Rachel glided in precisely on time, her heels clicking against marble floors with predatory confidence. She wore a cream-colored blazer that probably cost more than Elliot's monthly mortgage. Her smile as perfectly arranged as her platinum blonde hair. "Elliot, thank you for meeting me." She settled into the chair across from him with fluid grace. "I ordered us a bottle of the Cabernet. I remember you mentioning it was your favorite." He didn't remember ever discussing wine preferences with Rachel, but then again, she made it her business to know things about people. "I'm not here for a social dinner." "Of course not." Her smile never wavered as she poured wine into crystal glasses. "I'm here because I care about this family. About what Jason's built. About what you've contributed over the years." "Contributed past tense?" "Elliot, let's be honest with each other. You're hurt. You feel betrayed. I understand that." Rachel's voice carried the practiced sympathy of someone who delivered bad news to shareholders. "But continuing down this path, hiring lawyers, digging through records, it's only going to hurt everyone." "Everyone? Or just you and Jason?" She took a delicate sip of wine, studying him over the rim of her glass. "The company is at a critical juncture. We have investors watching our every move. Contracts that depend on stability. If you pursue legal action, it won't just damage Jason and me. It'll destroy everything you helped build. Elliot leaned back in his chair. So you're asking me to stay quiet while you steal my life's work? I'm asking you to be reasonable. Rachel reached into her purse, withdrawing a sealed envelope. There's a check in here for $250,000. More than your severance package. More than you'd likely win in court, considering the legal fees you'd face. The envelope sat between them like a loaded weapon. Think about it, Elliot. You could buy a nice place somewhere quiet, maybe near the coast. Start fresh without all this ugliness. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Because if you force us to fight this in court, things will get very ugly very quickly. Is that a threat? It's a reality. The mask slipped just enough to reveal something cold beneath. Jason has resources you don't. Lawyers who specialize in discrediting disgruntled former employees. We can paint you as bitter, unstable, possibly even a liability to workplace safety. Your reputation, your references, your future employment prospects, all of it becomes fair game. Elliot stared at the envelope, then at the woman who'd helped orchestrate his professional assassination. You really think I'm that weak? I think you're smart enough to recognize when you're outmatched? He stood slowly, leaving the envelope untouched on the white tablecloth. Rachel, you've made two serious mistakes tonight. And what would those be? First, you underestimated how much evidence I've already gathered. Second, you underestimated how far I'm willing to go to get it back. As he walked away, leaving Rachel alone with her untouched wine and worthless bribe, Elliot felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Absolute certainty about his next move. The newspaper office smelled of coffee and deadline pressure. Marcus Chen, investigative reporter for the Business Journal, spread Elliot's documents across his cluttered desk like a card sharp examining a winning hand. His eyes lit up with the hunger of a journalist who'd stumbled onto something bigger than expected. This is corporate fraud, plain and simple, Marcus said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. But it's also a hell of a story. Family betrayal, forged documents, systematic embezzlement. Readers eat this stuff up. Sophia sat beside Elliot, her briefcase open and legal pad filled with strategic notes. We need to be careful about timing. Once this story breaks, Jason and Rachel will lawyer up immediately. We want to file our civil suit first, establish our narrative. How long do you need? Marcus asked, his pen already moving across his notepad. 48 hours, file Monday morning, story runs Tuesday evening edition. Elliot watched the exchange, feeling like he was observing the choreography of his own resurrection. What kind of response should we expect? Marcus grinned. Denial, deflection, character assassination, the usual playbook. They'll claim you're a disgruntled employee making false accusations. But the documentation you've provided is solid. Bank records don't lie. The strategy session lasted 3 hours. Sophia outlined their legal approach. Civil fraud charges, seeking damages, and company ownership restoration. Marcus planned his exposé. The family business betrayal. How a nephew's greed destroyed a legacy. We need to control the narrative from day one, Sophia explained. Jason will try to paint this as a business dispute between family members. We're going to show it's criminal fraud with victims. Sunday evening, Elliot sat in his workshop staring at his phone. In 12 hours, Sophia would file their lawsuit. In 36 hours, the story would break nationally. There would be no going back after tomorrow. His phone buzzed, a text from his brother David. Can we talk? Jason says you're planning something destructive. Elliot stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. David had chosen his side at that conference table. Monday morning arrived with unseasonable clarity. Sophia called at 9:15 a.m. Papers are filed. The courthouse is already getting media calls. By noon, Jason's lawyer had issued a statement calling the lawsuit baseless accusations from a terminated employee seeking revenge. By 2 p.m., Rachel's PR firm released a counter-narrative about Elliot's declining performance and resistance to modernization. But at 6 p.m., Marcus Chen's story went live. The headline dominated the Business Journal's website. Exclusive. Documents reveal systematic fraud in family business takeover. Within an hour, it was trending on social media. Within 3 hours, larger news outlets were picking up the story. Elliot's phone rang constantly. Reporters, former colleagues, friends he hadn't spoken to in years. Fred called to congratulate him on finally growing some teeth. Tina texted photos of reporters gathering outside the company headquarters. At 8 p.m., Jason's number appeared on Elliot's caller ID. For the first time in months, Elliot smiled before declining the call. The war had officially begun, and this time, he wasn't fighting it from the shadows. The courthouse steps buzzed with reporters and camera crews, a media circus that would have terrified Elliot 6 months ago. Now, walking beside Sophia toward the imposing granite building, he felt nothing but cold determination. The morning sun cast long shadows across the plaza, and somewhere in those shadows, his future waited. "Remember," Sophia murmured as they climbed the steps, "answer only what's asked. Don't elaborate. Don't let emotion creep into your voice." Inside, the courtroom felt smaller than Elliot had imagined, but the weight of formal justice pressed down like cathedral silence. Jason sat at the defendant's table with his legal team, 3 attorneys from Morrison, Blake & Associates, the kind of white shoe firm that charged by the minute and specialized in making problems disappear. Jason's lead counsel, Victoria Morrison herself, stood with the commanding presence of someone accustomed to winning. Silver-haired and sharp-suited, she projected an aura that whispered expensive and effective. "Your Honor," Morrison began, her voice carrying practiced authority. "This lawsuit represents nothing more than a desperate attempt by a terminated employee to extract money from his former employers. Mr. Elliot Finch was let go due to declining performance and inability to adapt to modern business practices." Sophia rose smoothly. "Your Honor, we'll demonstrate that, Mr. Finch wasn't terminated. He was systematically defrauded. The defendant spent 2 years forging documents, embezzling funds, and manufacturing grounds for his removal from a company he helped build." The opening statements set the battle lines. Morrison painted Elliot as bitter and incompetent, a relic clinging to past glories. Sophia countered with forensic accounting evidence and documented fraud. As testimony began, Elliot watched Jason carefully. His nephew sat rigid, his usual confidence replaced by something that looked suspiciously like fear. When Morrison presented altered performance reviews supposedly justifying Elliot's termination, Jason's jaw tightened. "Mr. Finch?" Morrison said during cross-examination. "Isn't it true that you struggled with new technology implementations? That you resisted digitizing workshop operations?" "I advocated for gradual integration to maintain quality standards," Elliot replied evenly. "The technology was implemented successfully under my supervision. Yet productivity reports show declining efficiency in your department." Sophia stood. "Objection. These reports were generated after my client's termination and don't reflect actual operational data." Sustained. Morrison's strategy became clear. Discredit Elliot's competence while portraying Jason as a forward-thinking leader saving the company from stagnation. But when Sophia presented the forged signature evidence, Morrison's confidence visibly wavered. The afternoon brought Rachel's testimony. She sat poised and professional, her answers carefully rehearsed. Yes, she'd consulted for the company. No, she hadn't backdated any invoices. The payments reflected legitimate work performed. But under Sophia's cross-examination, cracks appeared. "Miss Voss, can you explain how your company billed for services in March when your LLC wasn't registered until later that month?" There may have been administrative delays in the filing." Administrative delays? Or were the invoices created after the fact to justify unauthorized payments? The courtroom fell silent. Rachel's polished demeanor flickered for just a moment, and Elliot saw something he'd never witnessed before. Rachel Voss looking uncertain. By day's end, the battle lines were drawn. Morrison's team would fight dirty, attacking Elliot's character and competence. But Sophia had the evidence, and evidence didn't lie, even when lawyers did. The parking garage beneath the courthouse was nearly empty at 7 p.m., fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows between concrete pillars. Elliot had expected to leave alone after reviewing tomorrow's testimony with Sophia, but Jason's voice echoed off the walls as he approached his truck. "Uncle Elliot, we need to talk." Elliot turned slowly. Jason stood 20 feet away, his expensive suit wrinkled from a day in court, his confident facade finally cracking. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't been sleeping well. "I think we've said everything we need to say," Elliot replied, his hand on the truck door handle. "No, we haven't." Jason stepped closer, desperation bleeding through his voice. "This has gone too far. You're destroying the company, our family's legacy." "I'm not destroying anything. I'm exposing what you destroyed." Jason's composure shattered. "For what? Pride? Some misguided sense of justice? You're going to burn down everything we built together over hurt feelings?" "We?" Elliot's voice remained steady, controlled. "When exactly did you start thinking of it as we, Jason? Before or after you forged my signature?" "I was trying to save the business. The industry is changing, Uncle Elliot. We needed to move fast, make hard decisions. You would have slowed everything down with committees and analysis. So you decided to cut me out entirely." Jason ran his hands through his hair, pacing between the concrete pillars. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. The plan was to transition you gradually, give you a consulting role, maybe emeritus status. But then you started asking questions, hiring lawyers." "The plan." Elliot stepped away from his truck, facing his nephew directly. "You mean the timeline Rachel outlined? Phase 1, Phase 2, my elimination schedule? You don't understand the pressure we were under. The investors, the competition, the market conditions. I understand perfectly." Elliot's voice cut through Jason's excuses like a blade. "You decided I was expendable." Jason stopped pacing, his shoulders sagging. "Look, there's still time to fix this. Drop the lawsuit. I'll reinstate you as a partner, give you back your equity stake. We can tell the press it was all a misunderstanding. After everything you've done, you think I'd trust you again? I think you'd remember that we're family." Jason's voice broke slightly. "That the business means more than your ego." Elliot studied the man before him. No longer the ambitious nephew he'd mentored, but a stranger wearing a familiar face. "You're right about one thing, Jason. The business does mean more than ego. It means something to the people who built it with their hands, their integrity, their sacrifice. Then why are you willing to destroy it?" "I'm not destroying it. I'm saving it from you." Elliot opened his truck door. "The company will survive this. Better people than you and Rachel will run it when this is over." "Uncle Elliot, please." "Jason." Elliot's voice carried the finality of a closing door. "The time for please was 2 years ago. Now there's only justice." As he drove away, Elliot saw Jason in his rearview mirror, standing alone under the harsh garage lights. A man who'd traded family for ambition and found himself with neither. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled with reporters, industry professionals, and curious onlookers drawn by weeks of media coverage. Elliot sat beside Sophia at the plaintiff's table, his weathered hands folded calmly as she prepared for closing arguments. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Sophia began, her voice carrying the weight of irrefutable evidence. "Over the past 2 weeks, we've shown you a pattern of systematic fraud. Forged signatures, backdated contracts, embezzled funds, all designed to steal a man's life work." She gestured toward the evidence table, stacked high with documents. Bank records that prove payments to fictitious consulting services. Digital forensics showing altered contracts. Email threads outlining a conspiracy to remove Mr. Finch from his own company. Victoria Morrison's closing was polished but desperate. "My clients made difficult business decisions to save a failing company. Mr. Finch's inability to adapt to modern practices left them no choice but to—" "Objection," Sophia interrupted. "Counsel is testifying, not arguing." "Sustained." Morrison continued, but her arguments felt hollow against the mountain of evidence. She painted Jason as a reluctant savior, Rachel as a legitimate consultant, but the jury's faces showed skepticism. When Elliot took the stand for final testimony, his voice was steady, controlled. I trusted them because they were family. I taught Jason everything about this business, treated him like a son. That trust was used as a weapon against me. Under Morrison's cross-examination, she tried once more to paint him as bitter and vindictive. Isn't this really about revenge, Mr. Finch? No, Elliot replied simply. It's about the truth. And the truth is that they stole from me, lied to me, and tried to erase 23 years of my life. If seeking justice for that makes me vindictive, then I accept the label. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the foreman's voice was clear. On the charge of civil fraud, we find in favor of the plaintiff. Damages awarded, $4.7 million, plus restoration of company ownership stake. Jason's face went white. Rachel stared at the table, her composure finally shattered. Elliot felt no triumph, only quiet satisfaction. Justice had been served. The courthouse steps were chaos. Camera flashes exploded like fireworks as Elliot emerged with Sophia, reporters shouting questions that blended into white noise. He kept walking, his expression calm despite the media storm swirling around him. Mr. Finch, how does it feel to win? Will you be taking control of the company? Any comment on your nephew's reaction? Elliot paused at the bottom of the steps, turning to face the crowd. Justice has been served. That's all I have to say. The aftermath unfolded with brutal efficiency. Within 24 hours, the Securities and Exchange Commission announced an investigation into the company's financial irregularities. The State Attorney General's office issued a statement about potential criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement. Jason's carefully constructed empire crumbled like a house of cards. The investors who had backed his takeover immediately initiated damage control, distancing themselves from the scandal. Board members resigned. Key clients canceled contracts. The company's stock price, which had been riding high on promises of modernization and growth, plummeted 40% in 2 days. Rachel's consulting firm fared worse. Her client list evaporated overnight as corporate executives fled from association with documented fraud. The business journals that had once featured her as a rising star now dissected her fall from grace with forensic precision. By the end of the week, criminal charges were filed. Jason faced 5 felony counts including fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Rachel was charged as a co-conspirator. Both were released on substantial bail, their legal fees mounting as quickly as their reputations disintegrated. Elliot watched it unfold from his workshop, now officially his again according to the court's restoration order. The familiar smell of wood and oil felt different somehow. Cleaner, like the air after a storm. Fred stopped by on Friday evening, bearing a bottle of whiskey and a newspaper with Jason's perp walk on the front page. Feels good, doesn't it? Fred asked, pouring 2 glasses. Elliot studied the photograph. Jason in handcuffs, his expensive suit wrinkled, his face drawn with exhaustion and defeat. It feels finished, he said finally. That's not the same thing. No, Elliot agreed, taking a sip. But it's enough. Outside, the sun was setting over the industrial district, painting the sky the color of new beginnings. The workshop was quiet except for the distant hum of machinery. The sound of honest work continuing, as it always had, as it always would. 3 months after the verdict, Elliot stood in his workshop at dawn, coffee steaming in the crisp autumn air. The morning light filtered through windows he'd cleaned himself, illuminating workbenches arranged exactly as they should be. Everything was in its proper place again. The company had been restructured under court supervision. A new board of directors, free from the Finch family influence, had voted unanimously to offer Elliot the CEO position. He'd declined, recommending Tina Rodriguez for operations manager instead. She'd earned it through loyalty and courage when it mattered most. His role now was what it had always been meant to be: master craftsman, quality overseer, the keeper of standards that made their work worth doing. The investors who remained after the scandal had learned to value that expertise differently. Sophia stopped by weekly, ostensibly to check on legal loose ends, but really to ensure he was adjusting well to his restored life. Today, she brought news of Jason's sentencing hearing. 3 to 5 years, she said, setting down her briefcase. Rachel got 18 months in community service. Her cooperation helped with the prosecution. Elliot nodded, continuing to sand the chair leg in his hands. The rhythm was meditative, each stroke removing imperfections, revealing the wood's true grain beneath. Do you ever think about what you'd say to him? To Jason? Sophia asked. I used to. The sandpaper whispered against oak. But there's nothing left to say. He made his choices. Now he lives with them. And you? Any regrets about how this all played out? Elliot paused, considering the question that had occupied many quiet evenings. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that loyalty meant so little to them, but I don't regret fighting for what was right. The workshop door opened, admitting a young apprentice Elliot had hired last month. Eager, respectful, hungry to learn. The way Jason had once been, before ambition poisoned everything good in him. Morning, Mr. Finch. Ready for me to start on those cabinet doors? Ready when you are, son. Elliot smiled, watching the young man prepare his tools with careful precision. This was how it should be. Knowledge passed down, craft preserved, dignity earned through honest work. The betrayal was behind him now. The future stretched ahead, built on foundations that couldn't be forged or stolen or destroyed by those who valued shortcuts over substance. Standing outside the courtroom that day, he'd felt the weight of all those years. Now, in his reclaimed workshop, he felt their worth, 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 felt their